A cold wind swept through the alley, carrying the scent of rain-soaked concrete. Curled up beneath a crumpled cardboard box, the little kitten, scrawny and trembling, lay there, its once soft fur now matted and filthy. Its ribs were visible beneath the thin layer of skin, and its meows were nothing more than faint, forlorn sounds lost in the city's noisy background. The kitten's half-open eyes seemed to express a desire to give up, too exhausted to continue searching for food. Just as hope was fading, a gentle hand reached down. A woman, her eyes filled with compassion, softly picked up the kitten and cradled it in her arm.
"You're safe now,"
she whispered, wrapping her coat around the shivering little body. The kitten nestled its head into the warmth, momentarily forgetting its hunger, as if knowing it had finally found a home. The kitten seemed reborn, glowing with happiness alongside Mrs. Mia. A loud crash startled the kitten. The sound of something being smashed came from somewhere, startling the kitten with fear. It was a tall man with angry eyes, James, Mrs. Mia's son. Every time James came home, it was like the air froze. His large hands would often clench and slam down on the table whenever something displeased him. To James, Mrs. Mia was nothing more than a weak, useless old woman, someone on whom he could vent all his frustrations in life. Every time James shouted and destroyed things, the kitten would cower, curling up in the corner of the cabinet, trembling. The kitten couldn't understand why James was so angry, why those terrifying sounds kept echoing in the once peaceful house. On nights when James returned, the kitten could never sleep well. Its ears were always alert, eyes wide open, scanning through the darkness, ready to flee at any moment. One night, after a fierce argument between James and Mrs. Mia, the kitten heard the sound of her sobbing. Mrs. Mia sat huddled in the corner, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. James had just shattered a television and stormed out of her rage. The little kitten jumped onto her lap, gently licking her hand as if to say,
"I'm here, I'll protect you."
But what could such a small kitten do? As time passed, James's violent behavior escalated. Each time he came home after failing at work, he would take his anger out on his mother. The bruises on Mrs. Mia's hands increased, but she endured it silently, not telling anyone, still holding on to the hope that James would change. One evening, during a heavy downpour, the kitten saw James return home, his face darker than ever. He trudged into the house and threw his coat violently onto the floor. The kitten sensed danger, a shiver of fear creeping down its spine, making its fur stand on end. James looked at Mrs. Mia and shouted,
"Sell this house and give me the money!"
Mrs. Mia, trembling, replied softly,
"I won't sell it."
"This is my home, and the kitten's home." James became even more furious. He moved closer, his large hand raised high. Just as James's hand was about to strike Mrs. Mia, something unexpected happened. The small kitten, who had always hidden in fear, suddenly jumped out in front of James. It let out a sharp cry, its green eyes blazing like two tiny flames. James froze, looking down at the kitten with a mix of surprise and anger. The kitten didn't back down. It arched its back, fur bristling like a tiny warrior ready to fight. Its whole body radiated a sense of protection, as if saying,
"Enough. You will not hurt her anymore."
James, furious, kicked the kitten aside. It slammed into the wall and fell to the ground, but it didn't give up. With the last of its strength, the kitten rose again, stepping in front of Mrs. Mia, placing itself between her and James. Though in pain, the kitten stared defiantly at James, as if to say, "If you want to hit her, you'll have to go through me first." Something in the kitten's eyes seemed to stir something within James. He stopped, his trembling hand lowering. He had never seen such bravery in a cat before, standing up to protect someone it loved, even though it knew it might get hurt. Tears began to stream down James's face, and then he left, disappearing into the rainy night. Mrs. Mia cradled the kitten in her arms, tears flowing not just from the pain but from the deep emotion she felt. Her little kitten had protected her in a way she had never imagined. No one knew whether James would ever return. But for now, Mrs. Mia and the kitten continued to live peacefully together. And every night, the kitten would lie next to her, its green eyes watchfully gazing out the door, as if it were still ready to protect her once again, should the need arise.